What's going on, everybody? So I've been thinking about the Steam Deck and the Nintendo Switch 2, and how a lot of people on YouTube have been comparing the two, and I've been thinking about exactly if the Steam Deck can really match up to something as convenient like the Nintendo Switch 2. And honestly, I don't think so. For about 80% of the time, I had almost a perfect experience with the Steam Deck, but even though I'm using SteamOS, sometimes I run into issues, like the redistributables installing randomly on startup, or SteamOS just freezing up for some reason, games consistently having either input delays or errors, with the game just not responding at all to any inputs through Steam input, Proton versions needing to be sifted through and tested for specific titles, with certain features not working, such as the sound, video, or sometimes even specific stages crashing on you, like with one of my favorite games, Prototype. About 5 hours into the game, it turns out the main Proton usually doesn't work with that title, but most people think that the game is playable because, well, they've only played about 2 hours of Prototype 1 and assume the game works. But I am a huge fan of the game, so I have to complete the game at least once, especially while playing it in handheld. So do I think the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be better than the Steam Deck? Hell yeah, of course I do. First of all, it's backed up by a billion-dollar company. And of course, Steam is also a big company, and considering what they've done with the Steam Deck, it is incredibly impressive. But they don't have enough clout or power to pull companies to modify and optimize games specifically for the Steam Deck, similar to how Nintendo does with the Nintendo Switch 2. Of course, it does take more time, but every game that is optimized for Nintendo, either Nintendo Switch 1 or 2, is going to play by definition perfectly. And I've always been optimistic about the Nintendo Switch 2's hardware. I'm hearing that it's more powerful than the Steam Deck, and there's no doubt about that, considering around the time where they started developing the hardware for this handheld console hybrid. It lands around the same time as the Steam Deck's development, but instead they're using one of my favorite company's CPUs, the NVIDIA Tegra chip. And I think that NVIDIA overall has a better reputation than AMD, but as of recent, AMD is proving to be better when it comes to lower power performance. So it's a bit of a tie at this point. But for me personally, if I had to pick one, it would be an NVIDIA graphics card opposed to an AMD one. Everybody knows about RTX, and lately, not many people have been noticing a big change within the 40 to 50 series cards. And at this point, it's redundant to even talk about the upgrades that come with the future graphics cards by NVIDIA. But in terms of CPU, everybody is curious to see if NVIDIA is going to bring that to normal PC handhelds opposed to something like a Nintendo Switch. But for now, all we have is an NVIDIA handheld through Nintendo, which is kind of the best thing ever. And as most people saw, Street Fighter 6 plays almost as good as the PlayStation 5 version, which is very hard to believe. But seeing a lot of the screenshots, Street Fighter 6 on Nintendo Switch 2 does look a lot better than it does on the PlayStation 4, and it's very close to the PlayStation 5 version, with a few effects missing here and there, and I can't get anything even close to that on the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck version does play almost perfect, but it has a lot of stuttering within the game world, and it doesn't look good at all. If anything, it looks worse than the PlayStation 4 version, but plays just as good. So I guess if there's any point to this video, it's, would I recommend a Steam Deck over the Nintendo Switch 2? Of course not. Honestly, first time playing a game on the Steam Deck takes around 8 minutes just to figure out exactly how to start the thing up with all the redistributables installing without any kind of progress bar on the screen. It just tells you to wait a minute, but it takes like 5 minutes to start up a game, and then you have to go through the graphic settings. It's not easy. If anything, it is a little cumbersome and daunting to start a game for the first time on the Steam Deck, but usually the default settings on something like SteamOS does work with the hardware that you're using, even if you're using something like an ROG Ally or Legion Go with SteamOS. It automatically reads what kind of hardware you have and sets the game's preset to that specific hardware. So it is easy just to start up the game, but it takes a while, and it is a bit concerning the first time you start up any game. And certain games, specifically like Street Fighter 6, require an internet connection whenever you haven't played the game for long enough. So say it's only been about 4 days since you went online to play Street Fighter 6 and you just want to play an offline match with your friend on your couch. The game is going to require an internet connection regardless if you're outside or not, so you most likely have to connect to some kind of mobile hotspot on your phone. And sometimes mobile hotspots don't work with Steam, so if you're lucky, you'll be able to get that game to work. Even if you've already established an internet connection at home, you're going to probably need to do it again if you haven't logged in through that specific device. So say you go back to your desktop computer and you sign into Steam, and if you use SteamOS on your Steam Deck or Legion Go outside and haven't signed in or just forgot to sign in, most likely a game like Street Fighter 6 is not going to work for you in that specific scenario. But most likely with Nintendo Switch 2, which I'm going to test myself, you'll have full access to the game offline as long as you're signed into that one Nintendo Switch. The system doesn't need to worry about you signing into a different one unless you have a primary and secondary, and then there might be a few mix-ups, but at this point, I believe that the feature of having a primary and secondary aren't available on the Nintendo Switch, so it is getting a bit more complicated to play on the Nintendo Switch and more of a tie. That's why a lot of people are talking about the Steam Deck and Nintendo Switch, but only time will tell exactly how convoluted it will become to play your games on your Nintendo Switch 2. But yeah, there are certain advantages to playing on the Nintendo Switch 2 versus the Steam Deck, and the number one thing is the convenience. You can't beat the Nintendo Switch's convenience, and the fact that you can play portable mode and docked mode within a few seconds. While the Steam Deck might have resolution issues while playing in docked mode, sometimes the dock that you're using isn't that fully compatible with your Steam Deck. Maybe you have to adjust where the sound is coming from, then you have to rearrange your controllers. A lot of things on the Steam Deck are manual, so there is that. It is the more modular version of something like a Nintendo Switch, but the Nintendo Switch is pretty much a handheld console hybrid for dummies. It's seamless and a perfect experience all around. But no doubt there will be some issues on day one with the Nintendo Switch 2, especially since the Nintendo Switch 2 is being manufactured more than any other Nintendo console in history in their first fiscal year. Yeah guys, let me know what you think about the Nintendo Switch 2 versus the Steam Deck. Do you think it's as ridiculous as I do? Because I don't think you can compare the two. One is extremely optimized with billions of dollars behind it, while the other just takes their chances with different Proton versions, but can pretty much play anything. One is pro-consumer, while the other one is pro-business. And I'm pretty sure you can guess which one's which. But yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good one. Later.